welcome to your own front rooms, your own kitchens, your own back rooms, your own stairways, wherever you are, your own offices. Hello, everyone. Very exciting. The second International Working Class Academics Conference, the greatest rhizome in the world ever. We're here all together making one thing, a beautiful thing it is too. And we're going to be really tight on time. So I've got some housekeeping. I'm going to do it after, because what I want to do is open with something powerful and brilliant and beautiful. And that is Lisa McKenzie. So I'm going to just go straight over to Lisa and say, start as soon as you like. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Peter. Don't know about all of that, but anyway, let's get on with it. Good morning, everybody. And I'm just so proud to be here today for lots and lots of reasons. Just actually one is that I'm alive. And I think we can all sort of agree with that. But it's an early start, but we've got a big few days ahead of us. And so the first thing I want to do is just thank everybody who's got up at this time. And I know we've got people from Canada and from other parts of the world that are probably here at a completely ungodly hour. So thank you, everybody, for getting up and for being part of this. I think we're making history. I honestly do. And I just want to thank Peter and Alex for doing this over the last 2 years. It's absolutely incredible what they've achieved and what I think over the next 2 days we're all going to achieve together. So just before I address you, and yes, Lisa McKenzie, like the queen of ad lib and sort of making it up on the spot and blagging, I've actually wrote a proper thing. So I am going to read some, and I never do this, but I am going to start. I'm going to read from something because I want to make sure that what I say today makes sense, because I think this is probably one of the most important spots that I've ever had in my life, actually, academically, or, you know, as a working class woman, because I'm speaking to working class people here. And I want to make sure that what I say is credible and we understand it. So I'm just going to give you a warning. Sometimes I swear. So there may be a few X-rated words throughout there. So there's my trigger warning, because in truth, I can't tell you how fucking angry I am without those X-rated words. So let me just now say that, you know, me being fucking angry may not be as offensive as actually talking about being working class in some circles. So I think this is where we're starting from. So there's much to say about being a working class academic, and why this term. And I wanted to start today by just thinking about this term, the working class academic. What is it? Who is it? And I think it's an important term. When I first handed my PhD in 2009, I don't think I'd really heard that term, working class academic. I knew a few working class academics: Valerie Walker-Dine, Bev Skeggs, Diane Ray, and Stephanie Lawler. 4 women who I admire greatly. And I know without them coming before me, I'm not sure I would be here either. I'm not sure that me sitting here and calling myself a working class academic and pissing people off would have happened without those women that came before me, those working class women. So I'm not sure when that term working class academic started to become any traction, but it is a term and I encourage you to use it. Start from today, because it annoys and it perplexes and it antagonizes most people who hear it. But what it also does is give us an opportunity to tell people why we are working class academics. So use that term. The perplexing part for most people who hear that is how can these two concepts come together? Academic and working class. Can working class people be academics? A question still asked, and it may even be asked over the next few days here. And if you have reached the dizzying heights of calling yourself an academic, can you still really be working class? What difficult questions these are. But like all good students that most of us teach, or some of us teach here or have been at one point, I defer to the Oxford English Dictionary. It's a pet hate of mine that students do this. But when I started to look up academic, because that's one of the points here, is that those two, that term, working class academic, a lot of us perhaps feel a bit shy in using it. So I'm going to tackle the academic bit. So the Oxford English Dictionary says, if it's a noun, academic, it's a person who teaches or does research at a university or college. But if it's an adjective, it means not connected to a real or practical situation and therefore not important. And apparently the origin of that word is from the mid-16th century, from French académie, or medieval Latin academicus. Of course, most of us here who are working class, we know all about Latin, don't we? We did that in our comprehensive schools. From the Greek word, it's academia, from academos. And academos was the hero who Plato's garden was named after. So there we are. We all know the roots of the term academic. And in the true spirit of the times that we live in, I'll leave it up to you. If you want to call yourself an academic because you think, you read, you teach. And remember, we have a lot in our working class communities. We have many autodidacts. We have people, we have teachers that have never formally taught, but stand up every day in their community centres or in the churches or in the community spaces or even in the queue at Tesco's and teach. Most of us know about our local communities actually from the autodidacts that stand in the post office and say, hey, do you know what? 50 years ago, this happened here. So that term academic, I think let's use it whenever we want to and wherever we want to. So the formal terms of academic. So you could either be somebody who teaches at university, or if we used it as a noun, it means, what does it mean in a noun? That's it. Not connected to a real or practical situation and therefore not important. I quite like being named after a garden, but I do know some academics who call themselves academics who may not be practical and not that important too. So let's now tackle that really tricky bit, the working class. Why, when those two words are spoken, written down or heard, is there a cold shiver that runs through any room, corridor or meeting? When unsuspecting working class vox poppers on the news say those two words, working class, you can almost feel the discomfort of the interviewer. And of course, the term working class cannot ever be used in a public and in an institutional discourse without a really good reason. As working class people, we've been called many things. Really anything that we have chosen for ourselves. We've been called the underclass, the residuum, the deserving and the undeserving. But we don't get to choose which one we are. That's for others. Chavs, povs, the precariat, the lumpen, the left behind. And here's the Labour Party and Unite the Union's favourite, working people. And all of this is to save the middle classes blushes about their own privilege. Well, can I just say now, I am not working people. Let me explain. It's the class in working class and middle class and upper class, which is the political bit. It's the word, it's the symbol, it's the understanding that our society is classified. And let's break this down a bit more. How are we classified? Why do the middle class not want to own the term, that meaning, and those classed experiences of a classified society? And why is the term working class so offensive? We are not working people, because working class people sometimes don't work. Sometimes we are disabled, but we're still working class. Sometimes we've been made redundant, but we're still working class. We are carers, and our work is never considered, but we're still working class. Some of us live between the cracks, the only places that we can survive, but we are still working class. And even when the working class lives in a system that doesn't allow us the dignity of economic comfort through proper remuneration, whether we work or not, we are still working class. We have unemployed working class people. I don't follow everything that Marx says, and I'm not here to have Marxist debates about, but Marx did say that the working class is a massive reserve army of people. And when the system needs us, we're in work, and when they don't, we're not. And so that term working class, or the terms of use of the class system in Britain, we must never let that go. Because when we let the class go, when we don't talk about that term, class, classification, inequality, we let the politics go. Don't let them depoliticize us. We are working class people. I just want to sort of take you back a little bit to a story. It's from one of my pieces of research. And it's about a young woman that I knew. She lived in St Anne's in Nottingham. She was a mother. And this really highlights what it is to be working class and not actually be working. So this is a story about a young woman that I met in the community centre in St Anne's a number of years ago now, when I was doing my PhD research. And she worked in the community centre. She would clean the tables and make coffees and generally be there all day, really. She had 2 young children. She used to drop them off at school, which was right next door to the community centre. Then she'd go into the community centre and she'd spend all day in there. And then her 2 kids, when they finished school, they'd go into the community centre. All day, she'd be there. She was a friendly face. Everybody knew her. What she also did as well is she made people feel comfortable. You know, when at 9:10, there'd be lots of other young women who had just dropped the kids off at school. They'd go into the community centre and she'd make the tea and whatever. A bit later on, there'd be some perhaps elderly people or people who were disabled, and they'd come into the community centre, perhaps have a bit of dinner. It was one of those sorts. It was one of those community centres that had a kitchen, and for about £2 you could like have a proper meal, proper hot meal. So lots of people in the community actually used it for food, for company. And her role in there of cleaning tables and making tea and talking to other women and being part of that community was really important. Now, in 2013, when the benefits changes came in, she was hauled into the benefits agency, and they said to her, well, now your youngest child is 5 and at school, you know, you've got to get a job. And I went with her actually, and they actually said to her, the person on the other side of the desk, and I use this term quite a lot, on the other side of the desk, said to her, don't you want to give back to society? You know, you've got a council house, kids are at school, you get a bit of money on income support, don't you want to give something back? She said she did, she really did. And that's why she worked in the community centre. But as the person behind the desk noted, well, that's not really paid, is it? It's not important. So in the end, she was helped into work. She ended up in a cheese packing factory. She got up at about 5:30 in the morning, left her children alone. She had no care at that time in the morning, and she got on a minibus that took her out, and she went and packed cheese, because her work in the community centre was not valued. It was devalued to nothing. The long and short of that story is that she obviously didn't stay in that job very long. It made her ill. She was worried about her kids. And because she'd given up that job voluntarily, she was sanctioned, and she was living on about 35 quid a week with her 2 children. But her work in the community centre, which was so important, and kept a sense of community, a sense of safety, was not valued in any way, and was devalued to, well, that's not really anything. And when I asked her about being working class, she wasn't sure if she was, because she didn't work. And so I think it's time for us to define who we are. You know, not middle class academics. They're not, you know, let's not allow them to continue to define us. I'm going to move on. I've got other stories, but I'm going to move on because I want to sort of get to the end of the thing that I've wrote. So our system in the UK is deeply classed. We all know it, from street cleaner to queen. We know our place. And we know our place doesn't belong in some time in the past. It doesn't belong in the 1950s angry young man novels, or in the new political 1960s satire. I know my place. It doesn't belong in the 1980s grotesques of Thatcherism and spitting image. And we didn't all become middle class when Tony Blair grinned into office with his working class friend John Prescott. We know our place still exists today, and it plays out in different ways. We don't all look up at John Cleese now and say we know our place, but we do it in many different ways. The class system has not really changed. It's changed in how it looks, how it behaves, but it's still there. It's still as insipid and nasty as it's ever been. Class inequality, class stigma and class prejudice is alive and doing very well in the UK, and in fact all over the world today. It's just that the British are really good at it. Class prejudice comes in forms and can hide itself, and the British class system works for those that work it. Let me explain. Class prejudice can hide. It's a bastard, and it's the devil convincing us that it doesn't actually exist. First, we've had eugenics and genetics. We were poor, we were uneducated, we were highly sexualized, we were known as aggressive, reactionary, and not in control of our emotions. because we're animalistic. These are old narratives about us, that there's something genetically different with us, there's something wrong, there's something that is less than, and it's nothing that, you know, we can solve. We were suited to manual work and to breeding and looking after our betters. After all, when the above strata is happy and well fed and well looked after by us, the crumbs may fall off the table. And these again are old narratives about us that we've been gaslighted with for hundreds of years. Thatcher said, they are not aspirational enough. Let's sell them stuff to take away the void and the pain and the loss of their communities and the loss of any self-organised dignity. Because out of all those resources that the working class can find and hold on for themselves, dignity is fucking dangerous. And to those that don't want that aspiration, leave them to find solace in addiction. Then the manual work went. It got sent somewhere else to someone else's working class. And then it was culture. We had the wrong culture, said Blair. We were socially excluded. We were excluding ourselves, actually, by not having the right culture. They need a fucking Mondeo and a wimpy house and to embrace Marks and Spencer's food, said the Labour Party, as they poured money into our communities that they took as a bribe from the bankers to leave them to get filthy rich. That money came into our communities to fix us, but it didn't change the system. Teach them how to eat healthy. Being fat, it's their own fault, it's a problem. Be a better parent, they said. Go to Sure Store, get some wooden toys. We love single parents so much, they said. We want to make sure that all of them are in full-time work. And we'll subsidise those crap wages and crap employers, the landlords, and we'll subsidise the charlatans. But we won't change the system. And don't forget, manual workers, you're backward stupid. Get in an office and wear some office clothes. Doesn't matter that the office is a fucking call centre, paying as little as it can get away with. And then we had the Lib Dems and the Tories, and they said, for fuck's sake, get an education, because a degree, that piece of paper can solve every inequality and can conquer every damn prejudice there is. It's a magic piece of paper and it only costs 50 grand. It's a fucking steal. And what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't solve all those inequalities? What if it doesn't solve all those prejudices in society, that magic piece of paper? Well, that's your fault. Because we gave you the option, we gave you the advantage. It's a meritocracy. You get what you deserve. And by the way, get on the M1 and don't look back. Because the only mobility you're going to have is going south. And here we are in 2021. The rich have never had it so good. The middle class, those on the other side of the desk, well, they're all Marxists now, reading the Communist Manifesto and convincing us it's the 1% that's the problem. It's the toffs, and that there are only two classes. Really? And guess what? It's the middle class that are really the working class now. Well, the devil works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? Making sure we never see, we never question, and we never challenge that system. So that's my run over. Enjoy the conference, speak to each other, speak our experiences and tell our stories. And think about what has happened to the class system. And ask, where is our representation? Where are our voices? Who decides which ones of us can represent and what others have to be silenced? Who is doing all the talking? Who is doing all the deciding? What is good culture? What is bad? What's a good job to have? And what's a valued person in society? And whose education is worth something? And why the weight of that degree really lies on what you already have rather than what you can accomplish. Let's challenge ourselves throughout the next 2 days and start to think about who really are our allies. Who benefits, and I'm going to leave us with this one question for you all, and who benefits from those unfair and unearned advantages, while at the same time smiling our faces and tell us our failure is our fault. And that's it from me. Enjoy the conference, and I'll be popping in from time to time. Thank you.
The only bad thing about Zoom is you can't hear all the applause, and I know it's going on everywhere. But brilliant, thanks, Lisa. Very powerful, just the opening we wanted. And I've got some questions on it. We have got 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask us a couple of these, and then maybe if you want, you can type answers to these, Lisa. But some will do. And I'll go in order that they arrived. I'm going to start with Cheryl. Cheryl asks, what do you think of the different terms used in studies of class and education, such as free school meals, disadvantaged, or postcode measures?
Yeah, left behind, all bollocks, all bollocks. It's all there to sort of hide the structured inequality. And that's why I think we've got to talk about being working class. The minute that when the middle class don't want to say it, we're onto something. Free school meals, it means that we're working class. Left behind, it means we're working class. Let's just say it. Why should we spare the blushes of the middle class who don't want us to see their privilege?
And it's a great point. And Wendy's got a question that I think it goes somewhere there to this like smoke and mirrors approach. What about this common narrative that once you are in academia, once you're an academic, you're immediately and automatically middle class?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, again, this is something that we can challenge. These are things that are said about us. These are things that are always said about us. I get accused of it every day. I'm too working class, really. But then, when I need to be pulled down a peg or two, it's like, well, how working class are you? You've got a PhD. Well, guess what? Working class people can fucking read books. So, you know what? Getting a degree or reading a book does not make you middle class. What makes you working class are your experiences. Think about that dignity that's withheld from us. You know, think about our experiences, and that's why we have to talk about them. We have to be our own storytellers because others are telling our stories. And it's and when they tell our stories, they define us and classify us all over again. And that we have to stop that from happening. So here I am today, I'm a working class academic, I'm a working class woman. That has not changed because I can read a fucking book. I could read a book when I was 7. I was still living on a fucking council estate.
Lisa, thanks, Carol, for answering this as well. So this is from Lisa Taylor, and she says, do you think we'll ever see class as a protected characteristic? I know that's rumbled along since the last conference last year, this thing, and then Carol says that it's been looked at through the equality review, but she doubts it. And I wonder what you think. Do we need it to be that? Or will it ever happen? What's the possibilities in your thoughts?
Well, a few years ago, I was asked as a witness or whatever they call them, and I went to a select committee in Parliament about this. Do we need it as a protected characteristic? And I've always been a bit dubious about it, you know, because you know, we have to be careful. We don't want to collapse into identity politics, and we don't want to collapse into cancel culture and all of that bullshit. That's not what we're about. We're about working class solidarity, not division. So I've always sort of been a bit dubious of it, but as the time's rolling on, I'm sort of veering in favour of class being a protected characteristic, just because when people are facing classism and racism, or gender prejudice or homophobia, and they're also working class, they have to choose where that prejudice is coming from. And as we all know, working class people, you know, we are intersectional. You know, we are working class men and women, and we're working class people with religion and not, and we're working class people who are all sexualities, and we are working class people from every nation and of every colour. You know, that is the beauty of the working class. You know, we have got the multi-genetics. You know, it's the middle class who all look the bloody same. So, you know, I think it's a question that rumbles on, but I think now where we are at the moment, where being working class is, you know, a thing that we can level at people and get them the sack, and level at people and, you know, not give them a job, and there's no comeback on it at all. I think we might have to make the argument for it.
And Shmuel asked a question, and I think it develops from that. He's talking about the moving towards a worker class. That, I suppose that's different now. That so you've got the idea that a protected characteristic in law, but also the idea that working class has historically been industrial, but it isn't now. Not really. I mean, it includes so much, especially in the UK. It's service industry spaces that are dominated by working class. And I don't know, what do you think about the concept?
Always been industrial. Again, these are stories told about us. My grandma was working class. She didn't work down the pit. She was a mum. My great grandma was working class. She cleaned in the pub and had 15 kids. You know, we've not always been industrial or connected to industry. We've always been diverse. You know, these are stories that are told about us. You know, and that's why sometimes, you know, we have to be careful not to disappear ourselves, you know, not to fall under the weight of what is said about us. You know, working class people have been all sorts of things. They've been farmers, farm labourers, artisans. They've made beautiful things. They've built things. They you know, we are, you know, we are not just people who work down the pit or on the docks. You know, we're men and women and children and everything.
On the Q&As, Carol's, I'm going to ask your question, Carol, but you've jumped in with other places, and I'm getting at this because I think there's an in-betweenness thing that's coming through. But the core to the first question is, how instrumental is money in determining class? And I think that's so massive, actually, right now in terms of football and where that works. You know, with the footballers that are at once in these two places, multimillionaires, but also working class, how they're spoken about and to. Do you know, so that there is that there. So what do you think in terms of that, Lisa?
I mean, I've always used that as an example. I remember used to using Wayne Rooney as an example. You know, the way that the media always approached who Wayne Rooney was, you know, thick and stupid, gorilla-like, you know, and it was also always relying on this sort of these old narratives about us being animalistic almost. And so we've always had these arguments with us, you know, these in-between people. Of course we have. But that's why I think what we need to do is talk about class. You know, let's not let other people define who we are, because the money thing becomes important. You know, the minute that, you know, you might, you know, pull you, you know, sort of crawl out of the ghetto, you know, or, you know, you put on a pair of decent shoes, Or, you know, I've even heard people going on about, well, they've got a big telly or whatever. In fact, once I had somebody accuse me of being middle class because I had a small telly. You know, these are not things that we define for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a big telly, you're spending, you know, you've got too much money to be working class. And if you've got a small telly, you know, your culture means that you're not working class because you haven't got a big telly. It's like, we don't define this stuff. And so for us, it's about that. And that's why telling our stories and then finding ways to tell those stories in our own terms is the challenge for the next few days. Because I know me and Peter totally agree on this, but we cannot use the systems and the structures that are already there because they are filled to the brim of the middle class who deny their own existence. And so for us now, it's about finding our own spaces, working with our own allies, and throwing those questions out about, you know, do we need these leaders from the middle class? Because I don't think we do. I think we're all right. We just don't have any. We just, for how many of us there are, we just don't have enough power. We're not seen enough.
That's excellent. Thanks, Lisa. I want to clap again, but I'm not going to because we'll never stop all day. But that's exactly what these 2 days are. This is a relocating of thought and experience and life, and it's not already mediated. We haven't time for more of the questions, but Lisa, you could go and type any answers into, you can see that Q&A, can't you? So there's some great questions in there that you might want to respond to.
And can I just say a lot? I mean, that quote, I use it all the time, that Helen has put, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house by Audre Lorde. And that is something that, you know, I say often and constantly, because it's really important that we listen to that, to hear that, you know, and, you know, and sadly that means, you know, the university education as well. We need to rethink what that means.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Right, okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Have a good day, everybody.